let's go ahead and get started with today's session. Thank you all who have been able to log in today and join today's session. My name is Asia Simpson. I am your Wellness and Health Benefits Consultant. I support you at Pomona Unified School District, and you may have seen me in yesterday's workshop or any of the workshops that I did last week or any of the workshops that you may have attended in the past that I have conducted. So today's workshop, as the slide shows, is we'll be covering voluntary benefits. And yesterday, if you joined us, we discussed HMOs versus PPOs, which are medical benefits that are ones that are already embedded in your benefits package. And so we'll talk about what exactly voluntary benefits are and a whole host of information I think will be useful to you. This workshop will be, it is positioned, I think, at a very good time, as tomorrow is the open enrollment health benefits fair that will be held on site at the Village at Indian Hill. Where in previous years, the open enrollment benefit fair has been held. And so this may provide you with a little bit of foundation, a little bit of good information that might be helpful for you as you move forward to make benefit elections, or maybe you were not considering it before, and maybe after this workshop, you may possibly consider making some changes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Oh, one quick thing, this session is being recorded. So if for whatever reason you have to log out or you have to leave a little bit early, or you'd like to just replay the content, you will be able to do that. And the information will be posted on the benefits page on the open enrollment resource document that has the recordings for this session. All righty, so let's go ahead and take a look at what we are going to cover today. So we'll first start off with what are voluntary benefits. I'll talk about what that is so that you kind of understand really what this is all about and what is being referred to when I mention what is voluntary benefits. And then we'll talk a little bit about how those benefits are paid for. That way you are clear on, are you paying? Is the district paying? Are they free? What's the case? So we'll talk about that. And then we will talk about the voluntary benefits that are offered through the district for really specific bargaining units as well, because sometimes the benefits that are covered and are available to you as an employee is sometimes dependent upon which bargaining unit you are a part of. And then we'll discuss a little bit around which voluntary benefits do you really need. That is subjective, but I do want to offer some thoughts around that. So it will be helpful for you to really make some determinations as far as that's concerned. And we'll talk a little bit, about choosing your plan. And that is also tied into it being a bit subjective, but again, I'll offer some thoughts around that may possibly help give you some guidance around that. And then we'll cover some helpful contacts and I'll answer any questions you might have. And if you're still sticking around at the end, we'll do another raffle. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first things first, what are voluntary benefits? Well, voluntary benefits are called something different, I guess, depending upon where you work. But essentially what they are they are benefits that are sometimes known as supplemental insurances or supplemental benefits. And they are typically benefits that are paid for by the employee. Your voluntary benefits that are offered by your employer through your workspace are ones that you can typically choose. And they are a part of what they call sometimes your fringe benefit package, and you have the option to choose them. Now, there are a portion of the benefits that are covered by the district, and so those aren't necessarily considered voluntary. And so what I mean by that are things like your medical benefits. Those are, for the most part, there is a contribution covered by the district. And if you're a full-time employee, you usually have to elect them to enroll or participate in it. Voluntary benefits are a little bit different because you can keep one, decide not to keep it, especially if it's not covered by the district. They're not going to compel you to have a voluntary benefit that is supplemental, that doesn't take care of your primary needs. And so what we'll talk about is what those are specifically. But before we do, I want to talk about how they're paid. And I alluded to that just a little bit ago. So some voluntary benefits may be fully funded by the district. And the reason that I say that is because going back to what I mentioned before, depending on your bargaining unit, there may be certain benefits that are covered completely, partially based off of tier for one bargaining unit, and then for another, there may be a whole benefit that is not included. And so what is voluntary for, say, CSEA may not necessarily be voluntary for APT. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And so some of the voluntary benefits, though, are completely funded by you just by, by that explanation. So if you are APT, and there are benefits that aren't covered, but you would like to have them, then obviously those would be ones that you would have to pay for. And the same thing for CSEA and PACE. And then some benefits are covered to some degree by the district, and you may choose to have something that is a little bit more comprehensive or a higher tier, and your contribution may not cover the cost of all of that. And so some of it might be covered by what the district provides in an allotment, and then some of it you may have to pick up the slack. So sometimes there's a little bit of a combination of the two. So let's talk a little bit about what that kind of looks like. So first of all, the types of voluntary benefits that are available and that are offered to PUSD employees are dental and vision, because again, dental and vision aren't something that is necessarily covered in full by the district based off of your bargaining unit. So it could be dental and vision. There's also accident insurance, disability insurance, hospital insurance, life insurance. There is something called a FSA, or a flexible spending account, and there are two types of those. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in case you aren't familiar with it. But that actually can be very, very beneficial actually for most individuals. There is also a supplemental insurance called cancer insurance. There's life and accidental death and dismemberment. Those can be two separate things, or they can be something that is combined, just depending on the plan and depending on which insurer you're going with. And then there's voluntary life insurance, and then there's long-term care with the option to buy up. And we'll talk about what that means. So I want to mention something because I've been talking about depending upon bargaining unit. I want to mention three things. So for APT, and that's generally your teachers, dental and vision is completely voluntary, because as part of your allotment, what is provided is for medical. So when you look at your open enrollment packet, you'll see at the very top, the district has provided an amount for each of the plans, and based off of tier, what they will cover towards the cost of your premiums for your medical. You'll also see that there's not an option, there is an option for you to get dental and vision, but there is not an allotment set aside for you. So if you decide to choose to get dental and vision, that is completely up to you, and it is completely voluntary. But if you do decide to get it, just know that that will be something that you will be paying for out of your paycheck. For CSEA, CSEA does receive district paid dental and vision coverage, as well as an allotment for their medical. It will look different, and the amount will be different for CSEA than what it is for APT. So again, that would be one of those scenarios where you're definitely going to want to check your open enrollment packet and look at how the allotment is set up. And these amounts are really negotiated by the bargaining units. So each year, your bargaining unit leadership will negotiate what these amounts are, and how those allotments will play out for the upcoming open enrollment. And then for PACE, PACE does receive district paid dental and vision coverage for employee and employee plus dependent. And so if you decide that you want to do a higher tier plan, that's entirely voluntary. Just know that it could cause an out of pocket. And one thing I didn't mention, just talking about CSEA, I do want to backtrack there. So it does cover district paid dental and vision coverage. and for employee only. So I want to specify that. So just be sure to look at your open enrollment packet. And if you don't have your packet, you can always go to the benefits webpage. Right now, currently, all of the open enrollment information is posted there. So if for whatever reason you didn't get the email, you didn't get your information, you can head over to the benefits webpage, and I will show you during this presentation really where you can access that information, just so that you don't miss out on that. So before I move on to the next bit of information, I just want to make sure that all of that information was clear and no one has any questions about that.
I have a question. Well, kind of an observation. I noticed that when it comes to bargaining for what do you call it, for salary, everyone, I mean, the APT kind of goes to bat, is in the front lines, and then the CSEA and the PACE have a Me Too clause, right? So that they get the same percentage amounts. So I just from a quick look at this, it seems like CSEA and PACE do better with they get district paid dental and vision, while APT does not.
That is correct. CSEA and PACE does get district paid dental and vision, but there's a lot of varying factors you do want to take into consideration because the amount that is covered on medical, that does vary, and it is different for APT as opposed to CSEA and PACE. And each of the bargaining units have their own priorities. For which, drives their bargaining when they go to the bargaining table. And I think that holds true for any district, for any, group who has their bargaining units based off of, what they've been experiencing historically and what their members are expressing to them that they need. And so I say that to say that if there are some feelings around things from your bargaining unit that you feel like you would like to have see more of in terms of allotment, you may want to voice that to your bargaining unit leadership, but just know that all of these things do vary from unit to unit. And so even though APT may not have dental and vision covered, just know that the medical allotment is quite different than what CSEA case.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and take a look at the benefits, the carriers and the types of benefits that the carriers provide. So American Fidelity, you all are familiar with American Fidelity, I'm sure. They are also who help with the benefit elections. They help the benefits department do the elections. But they also provide a number of different voluntary benefit options for you to elect to enroll in if you see fit. They have, and again, with all of these different carriers, some offer them to all, and then some only offer them to specific bargaining units. And sometimes that has to do with the long-term relationship that these carriers may have had with the bargaining units. It may have something to do with, what has been negotiated. So there's a lot of different, varying factors. But for American Fidelity, they offer to all bargaining units, all employees who are eligible, accident, cancer, disability, hospital, and life insurance. They also offer a flexible spending account. And flexible spending accounts we'll talk about in detail later. That is a tax favored account, and there are two different types that fall up under flexible spending accounts. Of all of the products that they offer, that is really the only one that I personally can say could be beneficial to virtually any employee. And we'll talk about why. Because the rest of these are they're subjective, they're based off of need, they're based off of really what your circumstances are, but almost everyone is going to have to at some point in time go to the doctor or should at least use, their benefits to get at least the preventative care. And so these flexible spending account, we'll talk about how that could play into being helpful for you. Pacific Educators They also provide disability insurance, life insurance, and cancer insurance. And they are pretty much kind of like a competitor to American Fidelity with some of these services, as you can see. And they're just an additional option and in addition to American Fidelity. They may not, or they do not provide quite as many options, but they do provide other alternatives for some of the options. And then ReliaStar, they also have life insurance as an option. And I have on here not medical, MetLife Dental, Delta Dental, and VSP Vision, because again, for APT, that is not a benefit that is built into what is covered. So these benefit options, though, for dental and vision are available across all bargaining units. Okay. Now, the ones that are by bargaining units specifically are the standard. The standard is somewhat of like a competitor for American Fidelity, but they only offer products to APT only. They are not an option for any other bargaining unit, and they offer life, accidental death and dismemberment, as well as disability insurance, also known as income protection. Okay. Unum also offers voluntary accidental death and dismemberment. They offer long-term care and a buy-up option, and we'll talk about what that is when we talk about long-term care. But those options are available to PACE and CSEA only. And this information, just so you know, I mentioned the open enrollment packet. The packets that are specific to bargaining units. There is a page on there that has a great deal of this information on there to really help guide you when you're looking at your packet of what is available to you based off of your bargaining unit. And then on the second page, or actually that falls on the second page. And then on the first page has your allotment based on your bargaining unit. And I want to note that even though the goal of this workshop is to provide you with an overview and a comprehensive look at all the benefits that are available to you, know that these carriers can offer new options at any given point in time. And so sometimes they'll update and they'll change that information, or they'll add additional services that they may not have had before. So please make sure that you refer to the actual insurance carrier for full scope of what services they offer. Because again, new things come out all the time, new options come out all the time. So you definitely want to get the most up-to-date information from them. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about vision and dental because I think that it's important to understand, based off of the options that you have, what differentiates them from one another. Well, there's only one vision plan, and that's VSP Vision. And by the way, VSP Vision as well as Delta Dental will be available at the health fair tomorrow, and they will provide a lot of information, summary plan information. You can access it on the benefits website, but sometimes the carriers actually have very good information that is a little bit more digestible and more current. It'll have information on the benefits webpage from the carrier, but sometimes they update their information, and sometimes it's a little bit more updated based off of feedback from clients that have said, hey, employees want to see this type of information. So they'll update that information from time to time. And so they will be on site tomorrow with their information. So I want to distinguish, though, when we're talking about dental, you do have two dental options as a Pomona Unified School District employee. You have a Delta dental option, which is considered like a dental PPO, or they call it sometimes a PDP, preferred dental provider. And then you have MetLife, which is a DHMO, or a dental HMO. And if you remember from yesterday's session, we talked about an HMO and a PPO. And so I want to show you kind of how those translate here. So with a Delta dental PPO, if you recall from yesterday's session, the PPOs allow a lot of flexibility. You're not required to establish, a doctor. And the same thing holds true with the dental PPO. You're not required to select a dentist before you go and see the dentist. You really just need to make sure that that dentist is accepting patients. You have a lot of flexibility with the Delta Dental PPO. You can choose providers who are either in or they are out of network, and it allows you a lot of flexibility to be able to really see whoever you need to see. So if you go into a dentist's office and you say, well, I have Delta Dental, and even if they're not necessarily taking Delta Dental, they will still typically see you because they can still get claims paid by Delta Dental. However, I'm going to spend some time making sure that you understand how this in and out of network benefit works if you have Delta Dental, because a lot of times there is confusion when they read the summary of benefits, and people misunderstand how it works. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time there. So lots of flexibility. See who you want to see. Don't need to select a dentist before you go start seeing the dentist, okay? So with MetLife, on the other hand, you are required to select a dentist first. You need to contact MetLife and let them know who that dentist is so that that information can be updated and the dentist is aware that you have selected them as a dentist. Then you can make an appointment to see that dentist. The dentist that you select needs to be in network, and otherwise you won't be able to get your claims paid or services paid for if you see a dentist that is out of network and you have MetLife. It just won't work. So there is less flexibility. And because of the lack of flexibility, your premiums for a DHMO are going to be a lot cheaper than a dental PPO. And we'll see that when we take a look at when I show you where your open enrollment documents are on the Pomona webpage. I'll show you kind of the difference in what the cost looks like so that you can see what I mean by that. Before we move into talking a little bit about the dental PPO and things to be aware of that I wanted to discuss with you all, I want to make a distinguishing note between two things that are very, very important that people often combine, and their frustrations and where they direct their frustrations are oftentimes directed in the wrong place. And that can be problematic because then you don't know how to resolve the issue because you're directing it at the wrong, entity. So there is a difference between your dental insurance plan and your dental provider. Those are separate. The dental insurance plan is who pays for covered dental services that are performed by the dentist. And the dental provider is who, obviously, I know this sounds obvious, but the dental provider is who performs the services and then they bill the dental insurance plan, okay? Some services provided by the provider may not be covered. You need to understand that. And so the reason I mention that is oftentimes I have people who are frustrated and they say, I went to my dentist and the services that they performed, I was not happy with it. And so I'm going to switch from Delta Dental altogether. Well, that doesn't solve your problem because it's the dentist who performed the services. So switching from your dental plan does not change the work that the provider did. You would need to change your provider. And so that shouldn't be the driving force for why you change your dental plan because you didn't like that provider. In that particular scenario, you're going to want to look for a different dentist. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So just make sure that you understand where your issue is so that you understand who to direct your concern to, so you know what you need to tweak. Do you really need to tweak your dental plan, or is it the dental provider, or vice versa? So some things to think about. I put a little note here just to provide even more clarity. When we're talking insurance plan, we're talking either a Delta Dental or MetLife. When we're talking a dental provider, it's doctor, I put XYZ because it could be the dentist's name, could be anything. And so could the dentist's office. So just to provide clarity so that you understand what I'm talking about the differences between the two. Before I move on, were there any questions about this piece of things? Because I tend to get questions around this. Okay.
Not from me, thank you.
Okay, I'll move on. All right. So I mentioned to you with the dental PPO, there are some things that you really need to be paying attention to. Because even though you have flexibility to see a dentist in or out of network, and you see something like what you see on the screen here, where it shows your benefits and covered services 100%, and it shows 100% whether you're in network or whether you're seeing a Delta dental or a non-Delta dental dentist. Everything looks like 100%. And you think, well, hey, this is great. I can see whoever and not have to pay anything. That would be an incorrect assumption. What is important for you to understand about what you're looking at here is what this is saying is that Delta Dental PPO dentists, what those refer to are all the dentists who have agreed to being paid a specific amount by Delta Dental for services that they provide. They are contracted with Delta Dental, so they have agreed to being paid certain amount for claims that they would submit for services they provide to you. And you will be covered at 100% of whatever those services are. And those services would have to be within the benefits and covered services. However, if you see a dentist who is not contracted with Delta Dental, in other words, a non-Delta Dental PPO dentist or non-Delta Dental dentist, then they will pay 100% of whatever rate it is that they would typically pay their contracted dentists for those services. So if you go to see a dentist and have a service that, let's just say the service would normally cost $500, would normally be paid at the $500 rate to a Delta Dental dentist, then when you go see a dentist, if they're not contracted with Delta Dental and they charge, say, $700, then what Delta Dental is going to pay is $500. And you're going to be on the hook for the other $200. So I want to make sure that that's clear. They're saying they'll pay 100% of their contracted rate. Okay. And it says it even on here, which is the fine print that a lot of people don't look at. Reimbursement is based on PPO contracted fees for PPO dentist. Okay. Premier contracted fees for premier dentists and program allowances for non-Delta dentists, non-Delta dental dentists. And a lot of times people are like, I don't know what that means. Well, basically it means that they're going to pay 100% of what they would pay their dentists that they are contracted with. And you're on the hook for anything that is more than that. Okay. Was that clear? I want to make sure that I didn't create any confusion where there wasn't any.
It is now, but they should have worded it or
yeah,
this grid out slightly different. That shows it. It's very misleading.
It is very misleading.
But down below, I see where it,
I mean, but even if you read that though, I mean, honestly, the way even that they wrote it out, I don't know that it's exactly clear to the average person who's reading it. If I hadn't explained it to you, I feel like it would still seem a little bit confusing by what they mean.
I agree. I agree. I think
Thank you.
that if we look at it just with, the naked eye, it's misleading because the numbers look similar, right? The Delta Dental PPO and the non-Delta PPO. And so, yeah, you're like, oh, great, great, great. And that's why, like you're saying, it's important to ask if they are an in-network provider, right? And even if they're outside, like non-dental outside of well, this is not even in network. This is a non-Delta Dental PPO. So that's, so I could see how that would be very confusing because there's a lot of things that you have to navigate.
Yeah.
Is this Delta? Is this not? Anyway, the way you presented it makes a lot of sense because I would not want to be on the hook for that.
Right.
Different.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that's an important thing because sometimes people go to their dentist or go to a new dentist and they find that for things that they weren't ever having to pay for with a previous dentist, now all of a sudden they're paying for, and they're asked, and again, so it kind of goes back to the slide before, making sure you understand who is at fault here, so you know who to direct your concern to. Because if you don't, then you're directing the concern to the wrong, entity, or the wrong, group. So if it's a billing issue, then, you may need to make sure that whatever they billed you, obviously the provider billed you properly, but that you had the coverage for it. And if it's a matter of coverage, you have to contact Delta Dental. And wouldn't it be so frustrating to contact Delta Dental and they say, oh, well, we covered everything we're supposed to. You just saw a dentist who's not in our network.
Right.
So that's why I want to make sure that you're very clear on that.
Another thing, yes, very helpful. I was thinking that I've learned over the years to get a pre-authorization.
Yes.
So before anything is done, I ask, okay, well, I would like a pre-authorization on this so that I can know exactly what my amount is going to be. And then then they kind of, okay, well, we need to find out ourselves and blah, blah, blah. So that's super important. And that way, upfront what the cost is gonna be to you.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I will go over some really basic important tips to kind of help with that. And it does encompass a lot of what you just said, is the pre-authorization piece of things, so that you know what you're walking into in terms of cost. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that exactly, since we just mentioned that. So these are some tips for using your dental plan. So I find these helpful for a lot of different things, not necessarily just from a cost standpoint, but making sure that you get the most out of your dental plan to help you from a dental health standpoint. So the first thing is to keep up with preventative care. Not only does preventative care, and that are things like cleanings and exams, right? Those are things that are covered in your basic services. Not only is it important for your dental health, but in the short term, but also in the long term. And then it ensures that you are getting or able to use your plan without having to have as much of an out of pocket cost in the long run. So I would say, in many cases, people don't have problems with the covered cleanings and checkups and all of that. But what I would say is that when you go to see your dentist, make sure that you clearly explain to them that you want them to only perform services that are covered under your current plan during your visit. Because what can sometimes happen is, if you are going to see a dentist who is really trying to get your business or upsell you on a lot of other different features that they offer in their office that are new. This has happened to me, and this is why I'm explaining this to you. Sometimes they'll try to upsell you on services, and then when it comes time for you to check out for services that you thought would be included in that day's visit, now all of a sudden you're getting a bill for. And so I would advise you to make sure that they know, hey, I only want you to perform the services that are covered in my plan. And if there's going to be anything in addition to what is covered in my plan, you need to let me know before you perform the service. And that will help you to avoid any unexpected expenses or any liability for expenses, that you didn't know they were going to be, for services you didn't know they were going to perform. So that's number one, I would say. So preventative care, but making sure you're very clear about the preventative care procedures you want them to provide, which are those that are covered in your plan. The second thing is schedule restorative treatments as soon as possible. This kind of fits with the preventative care, but this is as it pertains specifically to restorative care. And restorative care are things such as fillings, okay? And so it's really in your best financial situation to really nip it in the bud right away. When as soon as they identify that there's something like a cavity that you need to have them deal with it right then, because at that point it is a service that likely will cost you less, little to nothing. In many cases, 100% your plan will cover it. Whereas if you delay the actual procedures when it comes to restorative treatment, those procedures could turn into major procedures, and they could cost, a lot more money, a lot more, strategy in terms of when you schedule the services. It can just be a lot more of a headache for you than to really address the issue right away when you can address it with benefits that will cover it at 100%. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3 is remember that your benefits have a limit. And so if you remember when we just looked at the previous page, it did have an amount that limits your annual maximum. So you do have some things that are covered within your benefit plan that don't feed into that maximum, but know that there is a maximum as well. So if whatever service you have is not something that is part of your basic plan and service that's covered at 100%, know that there is a maximum. And that's important for you to know, because if you need to schedule a more expensive service, you may want to consider doing that closer to the time frame around when your new plan is going to start up, so that you can have part of the services done in one plan year and the other part of the services done in another plan year, and save yourself as much money as possible and maximize the use of your plan. I kind of mentioned that this next one kind of really goes into exactly what I just said. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So if for the plan that I have, I have Delta Dental as well. It's not the same type of benefit that you all have, but I had a tooth that was not properly crowned, and so it chipped, and the tooth under the crown just really went into bad decay. And so they had to remove it. They had to do a root canal, and I actually had to get a dental implant. And as you know, dental implants are not cheap. They're not cheap at all. But what I wanted to do was use my plan in a way in which I could come out of pocket as little as possible. So what I did was I scheduled, for me particular, for the plan that I have, my plan goes from January to December. So I scheduled my procedure in November and used up all of my plan amount, my annual maximum, in for that year in November, and then plan the rest of the procedure in January, because with something like a dental implant, it isn't like they just do everything at once. It is like very, like there's like a whole process, there's a healing process. They've got to do just a lot of different things. So instead of just having everything done earlier part of the 1 year, I pushed it towards the end of the year, and I used my benefits for all of that year at the tail end of the year I was in, and then scheduled the remaining part of the service in the beginning of the next year, and then paid the difference that way. And so that's what I mean by being strategic with how you use your plan, especially for major surgeries, or not surgeries, but major procedures. Okay. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes,
Great.
unless you have a doctor, yes, it does, but sometimes you have I've had dentists when I need a root canal. They said, well, I don't recommend that you wait until your next, so if I've used up all of my benefits, my dental benefits, say in August or whatever the date is, then I can't, because I think they kick in January, right?
Yeah.
With
I believe
APT.
so. Yeah, I believe so.
Right. So sometimes I've had that happen where I was trying to be strategic, but I couldn't be
Well,
strategic because they said it has to get done.
only thing I
Mhm.
can suggest in that, sometimes you just can't wait. But the only other thing I could suggest is you could get a second opinion. And the reason that I say get a second opinion, because I have gone to new dentists before where they said that I needed all this work. I was suffering from gum disease, and I need to have a deep cleaning, and, like $3,000 worth of work at one
Right.
dentist. And I go to the next dentist, and he says, your teeth are looking great. You just need a cleaning, and that's it. And I'm like,
Wow.
everything that would be covered under my plan? Yeah, yeah. So I think that's the thing, is finding a dentist who is a dentist of integrity.
Mhm.
Sometimes that can be
Yeah,
hard.
good.
Yeah, sometimes that can be hard, but I actually, in the next couple of slides, will be kind of helping you with how do you identify a dentist of integrity, or not necessarily help you do that, but give you some tips on how you can kind of look around and check them all out, whether it's a Delta Dental PPO type of dentist or if it's a MetLife dentist. So we'll look at that short. And
I just want to say that's a great tip, because I usually never go for a second opinion, because then I think, oh no, I'm going to use up the rest of my, what do you call, allowance, right? For me, it's 2,000 with Delta Dental. So I'm, oh no, I don't want to use up, because then I'd have to pay, and maybe I've used up. Usually I use up most of my dental every year.
Yeah.
But that's a good, but I like that. I like what you're saying, getting a second opinion with a reputable, honest. Thank you.
Yep. And I say I give you guys the horror stories that I've had, but there are some really good dentists out there that really just, they're not trying to gouge you or anything. They just genuinely, and there's some really good ones out there too. So but I do want you to be careful with the ones who are not. So, and then Paul, you had your hand up. You wanted to say
Yeah. Before you move on any further, I failed to ask you, back on page 9, under eligibility section in that grid, it says maximums of $2,000 per person per each calendar year. That's what we were just talking about. But what does D and P mean?
Diagnostic and preventative services, cleanings, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. All righty, so let's go ahead and jump into what I mentioned to you a little bit ago about, one more time. One more thing, I forgot I had this one in here. We're gonna talk a little bit more about flexible spending accounts, but it's kind of fitting that you mentioned the maximum of 2,000. If you have a flexible spending account, a flexible spending account, essentially, just so you know, the quick and dirty of it before we get into it, is a tax favored account that can be, it's a tax favored spending account that can be used to pay for medical, dental, vision, basically health related expenses, really help pick up the gap around what your health plan won't cover. And so you can use that flexible spending account to pay for these expenses. And essentially, the flexible spending account is funded by you. You decide at right around open enrollment timeframe how much you want to be taken out of your paycheck over the course of the year and deposit it into this account. And then that way, when you have situations like you've got to pay out of pocket for dental services that aren't covered on your plan, or you need to pay for glasses or whatever, in this case, dental, you can actually use your flexible spending account to pay for it. And the goal is to be able to use your money tax-free to take care of health-related expenses. Okay. All right, so I mentioned before researching and searching for dentists. And I don't want to spend too much time because I could, I've got a lot of slides here, but I do want to dig into this. So if we're talking about researching and searching for a reputable Delta dental dentist, the first thing I would instruct you to do, and these slides will be available for download for you to look at, is you want to go onto the Delta Dental website, and you can find a dentist based off of the, entering the zip code, or you can put in the name of a dentist if you're looking for one, at a particular office. You can do it that way. Some offices have lots of dentists, but you can put in your information, you enter the zip code, and then what you want to do is make sure that in your drop-down options, you select Delta Dental PPO. And then you can filter your results if you get like way too many results based off of your zip code. But you can filter them, and there'll be a number of different ways that you can filter it. You can filter it, based off of, oh, I want a doctor that is only a woman. I want a doctor who speaks Mandarin Chinese. You can filter it by a lot of different factors. And what I would say to you is, when you get this list of doctors, there are two places you can vet your dentists against. There is something called DentaQual, which is a third-party organization that evaluates dentists using 5 assessment categories. You can find this on the Delta Dental website. So when you select a dentist, it does have their dental qual rating on there. So this actually is really based off of this third-party organization. This is not based off of customer or patient reviews. So you're getting information from the third party, but sometimes what you want to know is, what are other people experiencing? And so I know it sounds crazy, but Yelp reviews are very helpful in understanding what other patients are experiencing when they go into the dentist. Now, there are pros and cons to this because sometimes it's subjective, and sometimes people are like, I didn't like the color of the floor, they get a 1 star. Okay, so you have to be aware of that. But sometimes you get very fruitful information about the experience that people have had with their dental care, the experience they have had with billing, or whatever the case might be. So this is what it would look like if you went to this Delta Dental website and you input the things that I mentioned to you. You can search by, as I mentioned, if you have the practice name and you want to find in the practice if there's one of the dentists you like, you can put it in there. You don't have to, but you'll want to put in the zip code of where you want to search. And this is why I said you want to filter it out, because this pulled back just from this zip code over 5,000. But when I mentioned to you before about Dental Qual or Yelp, Dental Qual, here it is here. And you will have the option to see how they fare on this third-party assessment of whoever Dr. Sarah Tavalcali is. And then you'll also be able to see what patients who have visited her office have said about her. And then it provides all the information on the location. And then you can also, if you need some additional information from Delta Dental, you can call them directly. But the filters I mentioned, if you've got over 5,000, you're not going to want to look through all 5,000 of them. So these are the different options on the right-hand side in terms of how you can filter it down. And I would suggest you at least filter it down by distance, if nothing else, because it'll narrow down the number of miles around this particular zip code. And then you definitely want to make sure you select someone who is accepting new patients, and that will help filter it down. And then if there are any other, factors that you'd like to narrow it down by, you can do that there. Apply it, and then it should pare down this number. Dental Qual, as I mentioned here, if you click on that, it'll take you to a separate page. But when you actually pick your dentist, you can see information like not only the Dental Qual and the review on Yelp, but you can see their license information. If the information you find is inaccurate, Delta Dental would like you to let them know, because sometimes the dentists leave practices, new ones come into practice, the information changes all the time. And try as they might, they'll never really be able to keep everything up to date, because people aren't always going to provide the updated information. Some practices may be really good at it, but others may not. Okay. So here is the Dental Qual that I mentioned to you. So it tells you these areas in which this third-party organization has rated or assessed this particular dentist. We looked at Dr. Sarah Tavalcali before, and here is another example where we go in depth of how her 4 stars were broken out. And you can click on this information if you were looking at it yourself, and you access it directly from whatever dentist you're looking at. But this tells you like how they rated her, okay? And they tell you really what Dental Qual is here, so you can understand, okay, well, who is this third party and how did they get their information and all of that good stuff. And it tells you here, and you can learn more about this dentist quality rating. And again, that's not from a patient perspective. If you're talking from a patient perspective, you're going to want to look at Yelp. So if we're talking MetLife, it's a little bit different. So obviously you go to the MetLife webpage and you enter in you select find a dentist, and you want to make sure you select dental HMO managed care. You would do the same thing with the zip code, and your plan for MetLife is Met 100. And again, same process. You want to filter your results so that you don't get a whole bunch. And you can filter it so that it only shows results that actually have a Yelp review as well, so that you're not looking at dentists where you have to turn around and go searching the internet to find out reviews about them. Yelp reviews are only on, you can actually find them on the Yelp reviews only on the MetLife page. Yelp reviews can be directly accessed, just like the Delta Dental one. You can directly access it from a link. But if you don't find them, or you don't see a link is on there, say you forget to use this filter option to get all the dentists with a Yelp link, you can still go to Yelp and try to search them that way, because they may still be there, and you can kind of get, and the other thing about Yelp is sometimes you can get pictures. They'll take pictures of the office. So, I mean, it can be very helpful. Okay. But again, customer opinions. So just note, some people may not provide the type of feedback that you feel like is valuable for you. This is what it looks like when you put in your search criteria on the MetLife website. Again, you can filter it out by all these different options. I would, if at a minimum, at least change your search radius if you get a number that of dentists that's really too high. I would do the radius and at least accepting new patients. Okay. They also have their own version of, if there's some information that's wrong, you can provide them with feedback on that. And here's the link for directly accessing Yelp. Some of the same type of dynamic here with MetLife as with Delta Dental when it comes to the information they provide. Licensing information, location, a breakout here of what their background is, what languages they speak, really some good information. And I don't think a lot of people really use it. This is what it looks like if you were to go on the Yelp website. You can see kind of what the rating looks like. And it gives you some of the photos too. They'll give you sometimes pictures of what the outside of the office looks like. I mean, I don't know about you, but if the office looks run down, I'm not going into there and have them open up my mouth and start to dig in on my teeth in a dirty office. So that is that. Before we hop into flexible spending accounts and the rest of the information, were there any other questions here?
No, thank you. I've actually been looking on the PPO side while you were going over this. It is very inclusive. I'm glad you brought this up. Thank you.
No problem. So let's just hop back to talking about flexible spending accounts, because we mentioned them as a way to help supplement the costs for your dental expenses. And as I mentioned before, FSA is a health favored, a tax favored account that you can get through American Fidelity is actually who provides it. But there are two different types of flexible spending accounts. There's one for healthcare, and that would be the one that you would use for dental. And then there's one for dependent care. So if you have children, or if you have an elderly parent, you can actually have money set aside for a dependent care FSA, and it can be used to pay for the costs of any of those expenses. There is a maximum amount for each one of these types of accounts, and you can have both accounts at the same time, or you can have one or the other. It really depends on your need and what you decide. You're going to establish the amount at the beginning of the year. Really, it's the amount over an open enrollment for the upcoming year. So now would be the time that you would be establishing what you would want your FSA, your healthcare or your dependent care FSA amounts to be. And the maximums for this year, for 2024, is $3,200 for healthcare. And that means the maximum amount you can have taken out of your check for your flexible spending account for 2024 is $3,200. Okay. If you're doing dependent care, it is the maximum contribution for this plan type is $5,000 per tax year for single and married couples together. If it's just a married individual or individual themselves, it's going to be $2,500. So basically what would happen is, once you establish the amount, then those amounts will be broken up and deducted from your payroll. However number of payroll amounts they have it set up for, I don't know what that is. You would have to contact your benefits department. I'm going to assume it's tenthly, just like your medical benefits, but you want to still confirm that with your benefits department. And then if you don't use all of these amounts, you can roll over. And the last time I checked was 610 for the 2023 plan year. I don't know if that's changed for 2024. So you would want to make sure you check with American Fidelity to find out if that amount has changed. Each organization and each company who offers these can have the right to allow you to roll over, or they may not. It looks like the American Fidelity product does allow rollover. So the IRS does allow flexibility on that. These are regulated by the IRS, just so you know, okay? Any questions on that? I know this was kind of brief I've done workshops that focus specifically on flexible spending, but I wanted to give you the quick and dirty of how these work.
Yeah, I have a question. So the rollover is 610, and that's for both the healthcare FSA and the dependent FSA, dependent care?
Yes, and so yeah, I believe actually that may just be for the healthcare FSA. I don't know if the amount is different for this dependent care one, but this I know would be for sure for the healthcare one. And again, this is the amount that was valid for 2023. I don't know if they have changed or updated it for 2024. So that would be, you would want to speak with American Fidelity on that to confirm. And the reason I say that is because honestly, the IRS releases the amounts for the upcoming year at the end of the current year. So these amounts that are provided, they gave at the end of 2022. And then at the end of 2023, I don't know what they would have provided to American Fidelity for the rollover amounts. I would say if it's your first time doing an FSA, be conservative with the amount that you have allocated, because you don't want to have $1,000 worth of money that you didn't use, because you can't just get it cash back. You have to really use it for a health related expense. Okay.
Yeah, you use it or lose it, right?
Well, the 610, not use it or lose it. If you have $1,000 left over from a healthcare FSA and you don't use it, you can roll over 610, but you will lose that other 400.
Right. And I have an FSA. I really like it, but like you're saying, I know for me, I had to just be really clear on there's a cutoff date where you can spend. And I think it's August 31st, but you have to have those receipts turned in by November. And I got so confused with that. So I think, yes, you're right. You just have to be on top of it.
Yeah. And I did request that American Fidelity bring some updated pamphlets to the health fair because they haven't really brought any in a while, but I thought it would be a good idea for them to bring some updated information, that includes updated information on the flexible spending accounts in particular. So stop by the fair if you get a chance, and hopefully you'll be able to get some new information on that. All right, so life insurance options. So just I'm going to kind of go through this a little quick because some of these are very similar benefits. So it'll be it may sound a little redundant. But life insurance, just as a quick overview, life insurance ensures that your family is financially covered in the event of a loss. And the loss could be based off the insurance plan that you have, the type of insurance you have, whether it's term or whole life, those can vary. And the amounts and type of coverage, because that varies also. It can cover different types of loss, and the parameters of the plan, that's what you really have to be paying attention to, so that you are able to select one that fits your needs. Some plan options may have accidental death and dismemberment as part of the plan design, and in others, it may be something that's separate that you would have to purchase. The other thing that may vary from plan to plan that is offered through these vendors is whether or not they're portable. And basically what portable means is if you leave the district, can you take that plan with you, and will you be able to maintain it if you go to, another employer? So you want to check to see if it's portable. For some people that matters. Some people it doesn't, but it could be very helpful to have a plan that is portable in terms of a life insurance, especially if you really like the design of the life insurance plan that you're paying for. And then some options in terms of the life insurance may be very different based off of bargaining unit. So what I mean by that is certain vendors may offer different options, and they may not be available to all of the bargaining units. So for example, I mentioned to you before, the standard only is available to APT members. So these life insurance options are available through the standard, which is for APT only, but they've got American Fidelity and Pacific Educators and Reliance Star. Those are available to pretty much all of employees. And then you've also got Unum that I think is only available to CSEA and PACE. Okay. And basically the benefit in terms of the general features is usually guaranteed for the life of the policy, as long as the premiums are paid. And now the premium structure may either be set or it might fluctuate over time. Some might have inflation type of design built into it, whereas time goes on, after a certain number of years, the cost of the premium may go up. It just really depends. So there's a lot of different options there. And some death benefits, the death benefits are generally paid tax-free. So if there is a death benefit that is paid, you usually don't pay any taxes on it. And you may have vendors that don't require medical exams, and then you may have some that do. So all of these things vary, especially when you have so many different options with the district. Accidental death and dismemberment, I just mentioned before that for some life insurance plans, it may be built into the design of the plan, and then others, it may be an option that's separate. And it is something that is definitely offered separate, but it is a type of insurance that provides a benefit if the policy holder dies or is dismembered in an accident. And dismemberment, just to clarify, it's like the loss of a body part, like a limb, or hearing or speech. And some plan options may have it, as I mentioned, part of the design. And the thing to remember is that the amount of coverage is going to vary based off of which option you choose. So it's not going to necessarily be cookie cutter. And it may not be the same if you purchase the AD&D plan separate than what is embedded in another plan. So you want to make sure that if you already have a plan, that it doesn't already have that embedded in it. And if it does have it embedded in it, does the amount meet what you feel like is a reasonable, policy amount? So check that out, because then you may find that if you have it embedded, it doesn't have the amount that you want. So you want to check and see if that amount can be increased through the same plan, or if you'll have to purchase an additional add-on. Okay. It's typically cheaper, I'll be honest, and sometimes people say, well, maybe I should go and look outside of, where I work for. Well, you could, but just make sure that you compare before you make a leap, because it's typically cheaper when you purchase through an employer or a large group. You get a better deal. And then the accidental death and dismemberment separately, it is offered through Unum and Standard. So it's an option that can be purchased separately for all bargaining units. It just depends, on which particular vendor you go with. So I mentioned Unum is offered to CSEA and PACE, and APT is the standard. All this information that I'm going over with you too, you can access it on the benefits webpage, so it is accessible there. Accident only is really just, in essence, it's a option that helps cover expenses in the event of at an unforeseen accident, and it can cover incidents that are on the job or off the job, and depending on the carrier, which in this case is American Fidelity, they could possibly extend coverage to family. You'll want to check with them to see if that's an option, and also to see if it's portable. And the policy is guaranteed renewable as long as those premiums are paid. Okay. For this one, for accident insurance, accident only, they're paid directly to you as the member. And it's based off of the last time I checked, no medical questions are asked. So I don't know, that might be something you might be interested in. Disability insurance is something that's also called income protection. You probably have heard both versions of it. But it basically is a benefit that is paid directly to you due to a covered injury or sickness that a leave enrolled member is unable to work or unable to work part-time. And it is usually pays a cash benefit. There are some people who swear by it. They think it is the best thing ever. There are some who don't. You'll have to really determine for yourself if that's something that you're interested in seeing if it has value for you. Premiums are not typically required while you're disabled, and based on whatever the length of your disability is, they'll ask you all those questions. And then the plans may vary on how they pay. The benefits like sick leave, STRS, PERS, it'll vary, and depending on the vendor, they will have it outlined in terms of how they pay out. And American Fidelity, Pacific Educators, and APT, they all offer those options. So you can compare which one you feel like has the best income protection plan. And they're not the same. So you do want to check them. They're not cookie cutter, so one may fit your needs better than the other. Okay. And then one thing I want to mention is the plans, each of the plans may vary not only in the amounts that they pay out, the way they pay out, but also the elimination period. And essentially the elimination period is the amount of time that you as the policyholder have to wait before you actually start receiving your actual payments. So that varies. Something very important to remember, because if your elimination period is 4 months, and who wants to go 4 months without being paid? Something to make sure you consider.
So I have a question about that. So then the three, I want to say providers, but the three companies would be American Fidelity, the Standard, and which is the
Pacific Educators.
Pacific Educators, and they each have probably a different elimination period.
Yeah, a different eliminate, and you'll see they have at least in the past, they've had when Pacific Educators has attended, they've had even a schedule so you can see what it looks like.
And the elimination period is what again? It's how long it takes you to start getting paid? Is that what you said? Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering too, what if, say, a teacher or a employee decided not to get any of these?
You're not required, yeah.
Right. So, but it would seem to me that the district would still pay you or not while you're on medical leave?
They do. There is a long-term disability option, not to be confused with this one. And that is one that is included, that the district pays for. And that is through Unum. But that is not considered a voluntary benefit option because they cover it as part of your benefits.
Okay, so for a person like me, an APT person, then if I didn't have this income protection coverage, then what? How would I get paid while on medical leave?
Well, how you would get paid on medical leave, that would definitely be something you would want to make sure that you discuss with the benefits department, because I do know that they have guidelines and parameters around their long-term disability payouts, and like what the policy is for that. And there is, I believe, a certain period of time that would qualify you for long-term disability, which I believe the reason that this disability insurance or this income protection option comes into play, where it could potentially help fill that gap. So how you would be paid, in terms of from a long-term standpoint, that you would want to talk to your benefits department to find out what the policy is and like what the guidelines are around that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Alrighty, so cancer insurance. Cancer insurance, this is a bit of controversial. I mean, I've talked to a number of people who swear by it, and then I've talked to people who feel the opposite. But essentially, this cancer insurance is a coverage option that provides you with supplemental assistance to if you have cancer. Now, it does not replace your insurance, and in fact, it is not the primary insurance that would be used if you had cancer. You would actually present your medical plan, and then anything that your medical plan did not cover, this is supposed to provide kind of like that wraparound support. And it's supposed to help pay for things like your exams that may not be covered, or diagnostic labs and stuff that may not be covered by your medical plan. So if you require extensive tests and extensive exams, which a lot of times, if you have cancer, depending on what type of cancer and at what stage it is, it could be very, very extensive. And so I can see why this could potentially be subjective, because based off of your stage and the degree of your ailment, as it pertains to cancer, this could or could not be, beneficial to you. Carries the American Fidelity and Pacific Educators are the carriers that offer both of these. And they may or may not require an exam. I don't know which one does and which one doesn't. But I will tell you one thing to make sure you pay attention to is that if you have ever had cancer in the past, then there may be a time restriction around whether or not they will allow you to enroll in this particular type of insurance option. Some do have a requirement that if you have had cancer, you wait 5 or 6 years before you enroll in this, and you have to provide proof of that. But the benefit, though, if you are eligible, is paid directly to the member. And the options available, you can choose a variety of different options. I believe they do also cover things like transportation and lodging. They may cover radiation, chemo, hormone therapy. So again, this could be an option that is good for, some people. What I take issue with, though, is this being something that just the general population automatically enroll in. I do understand that there are some people who have, a history in their family, and they feel like it might be a really good option for them. Or if they may be genetically predisposed to it, to cancer, then they may consider this as an option. But just in general, I would encourage you, do not allow yourself to be pressured to enroll in this if you do not feel like this is something that you may need, because this isn't something for everyone. Now, granted, we never know what's going to happen from a health standpoint, but at the same token, if you are relatively healthy, don't have a history of it in your family, or don't feel like you have had it, from a genetic standpoint, this may not be something that is worth it for you to be paying for. Long-term care buy-up option. So the long-term care benefit, again, this is another one that is a bit controversial, but being that our healthcare system is it can be challenging for most, especially as you get into your later years. This may be beneficial to some people, and I personally can see some benefit in it myself. But I do understand where people take issue, because it is something that you pay over the long term. And if you stop paying it, then you've lost all of the money, and then you can't reap the benefit of it. But that's with any insurance, to be quite honest with you. But what the benefit is it does help pay for adult daycare, hospice, respite care, nursing facilities, which are quite expensive. And I think this is kind of one of those things where some people cannot really see the long-term benefit, because of the fact that a lot of people don't like to think of themselves in a scenario where they would need something like this. But this is, the idea is that we are hopefully able to grow older. And we don't always know, what our situation will be when we get older. And so sometimes people think that this might be a good option. Whether it is for you, that's really very based off of person to person. But you do have the option here, and this option is available for PACE members only, actually. And then you do have the option to buy up. And what buy up means is they offer a schedule of, a plan option. And with that particular plan option, it has a certain amount of coverage. But if you feel like you would want a higher coverage amount, you can purchase more so that you will have a higher coverage. And they have created a very specific microsite for PACE members to visit to get more information. And so I've included that link here. Again, I do want to mention this is for PACE members only. I do want to say something about long-term care just because I always get questions on it. Well, number one, I've provided some resources here around long-term care. But long-term care is care you may need if due to chronic illness, you're unable to perform without substantial assistance from another person, eating, bathing, continence, that's just like your basic daily living. And so that is when long-term care would be important. And it's also care you might need if you need supervision to protect yourself from health, from your own health, from health threats due to, and what I mean by that, if you are experiencing Alzheimer's or dementia or mental illness, you may need supervision. And so that will oftentimes fall under long-term care. And then many people buy long-term care insurance when they're younger because the premiums are a lot cheaper. If you
Doesn't
were
work anymore that way.
Oh, it doesn't work that way anymore?
No, now anyone who's young is going to be paying for all of the costs that are going on right now with those who are using it. And it's not too good to get in when you're too young. If you get in when you're too old, then it's way too expensive. There's this cutoff period where it makes a lot of sense, but not too young, because you will be paying an arm and a leg. And these LTC insurance companies now are raising the rates left and right because of actuarial problems. So one thing that is really important, though, I think, with long-term care is the asset protection of an estate. That comes more into play of if you don't have it, your entire estate could be wiped out.
Yes, and we actually had we had an estate planner last year do a workshop on that very thing that you're talking about. And we had quite a few people asking about exactly what you're talking about now.
So it's a love-hate relationship, long-term care.
Yeah.
It's god-awful expensive, and they're raising rates on people who have been in it for years and years to a point where they're forcing them out.
Yeah.
And because they made mistakes earlier, and people who have been paying tens of thousands of dollars over the years are now being forced out of their own policy.
Yeah. No, so you lose, and that's the controversial piece of it. It's like you lose all of that money that you've put into it because you've put the money into it with the idea that you're investing in having some type of security for how you're taken care of in the future.
Correct.
Now you don't have that. And the other thing too, I wanted to mention that why it makes this is so controversial is that, there have been so many studies on over the years on the value of long-term care having dropped and a lot of people pulling out of them. And so there have been so few people now in comparison to when they started who actually enroll in long-term care that the costs have drastically changed for those who still, are interested in it. Yeah, are in it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, too, I'm thinking that for teachers, I mean, here, administrators and CSEA folks have access, while teachers don't, as an option. We don't have the option. And I've talked to the APT leadership, and it's not something that they want to bargain for.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why. I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of teachers, that are aging within the district, and why not have that as a benefit, or that they could buy into? It's not like it's a free benefit. It doesn't sound like it's something that the district would pay for, but it sounds like it's something that if we choose to buy, then that would come out of our, money out of our pocket.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely something though I'm happy to present to the committee and ask if they are interested in or would be willing to, consider other
Well,
options as a volunteer.
you could buy direct anyway through
Right,
units.
but the point is that, is it Asia?
Yes.
I'm not sure. Okay, like Asia was saying, when you buy these policies as a group, right, as a district, your premiums are going to be more cost effective rather than trying to get your own policy, right?
true.
That's going to be I would imagine that it's going to be a huge difference in the premium if you're buying it alone versus part of like a district of 2,000, 3,000, however many thousands. I would think
Yeah.
that you would get a better pricing on that.
Yeah, typically that is the case. Yes.
Good
So
point.
yes, Asia, if you can bring that up, that we would have access, because teachers, I mean, we get old too, and we want to be covered
Mhm.
or have the option, right? To
Right,
buy that.
right. Paul, were you saying something?
No, as Dahlia made a very good point. Yeah, through bargaining or having a group policy might be a little bit less expensive, but I think either way, it's still a pricey,
Yeah.
probably the most expensive insurance right now outside of healthcare direct of any other insurances. But I think it's also super important.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because then
necessary evil.
the alternative is then you're kind of left to the whims of what is available through state
Well,
long-term care facilities if you don't have anything, because then they make you exhaust pretty much all of your assets. I mean, it's such a crazy process. They really want to bankrupt you before
they
you
will, yeah,
can
they will
get
bankrupt you if you don't have any, and that's a shame, isn't it? One
Yeah.
works all their life amassing X, value or wealth or whatever you want to call it. And then they get in their final years, it all goes to pay out for long-term care that the insurance companies have made almost virtually ridiculously impossible to
Yeah.
afford,
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
for the average Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you would think there would be a cap on the premium of how much they can continue to increase these premium amounts.
I think
Like, why is
that
it unregulated? Why can they
Well,
just say,
the state
"Look,
of, as an example, the state of California doesn't want to see them going out of business. So they are allowing all these long-term care companies, which there aren't that many actually, but they're allowing them all to raise their rates indiscriminately because California insurance regulators don't want to see them go out of business. So it's silly. I mean, we as a consumer are getting dogged on it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Asia, I apologize. I need to get rolling.
Sure.
Need to pick up my brother.
Okay.
Thank you very much
No
for your
problem.
time. This has been good info.
No problem.
My wife will be there tomorrow for all the sign up. So thank you, ladies.
No
Take
problem.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Dahlia, we're almost done here. I've just at the very last two slides actually. So
okay, sure.
So the question is really, we've kind of been talking about this, what voluntary benefits do you really need? And the truth is only you can really determine that. I would say that of all these things, if nothing else, you really want to make sure you have your basic dental and vision if you're just absolutely can't afford anything else. But your needs are really going to reflect, in terms of the voluntary benefits, what you and your family really are trying to, like what you're trying to protect for you and your family. So life insurance is going to be one of those things that I think that whether you have a family or not, I think I can see the value of it, but especially if you have loved ones, who, you would leave behind if you passed away, you definitely want to have something like life insurance. So, but you should always consider your budget constraints, and you should consider how long you would like the benefit to cover you. So those are going to be important things, and it'll be different for each person based off of like your age. If you are, very, very young, you may not, you may want something that has coverage terms that's a little bit longer as opposed to if you're older. So that those things are going to vary. But the other thing that's going to really, I think it's important for you to take into consideration based off of where you are, and especially where you are with the district, is whether or not the plan is portable. Because if you see yourself staying with the district, or if you don't, or you may have been thinking about it, you may want to consider policies that have some level of portability. Now, when you're talking about dental and vision, a lot of times those are not portable. But the other voluntary benefits could be potentially portable, and that might be something that is something that you want to consider when you're thinking about which options may be good for you. The other thing I would say is, when you're thinking about what options are good for you, getting advice from other people is great. You get to hear their perspective, you get to hear the pros and the cons of what they've experienced. But you should always take that as with a grain of rice, because each person's situation in life and needs and desires are going to be different. And you want to make sure you're considering, what do your primary benefits cover? And that's important, because you don't want to get a voluntary benefit that is already covered with your primary benefit. So you're paying extra for something that you are already getting that you don't need. And I say that in the instance of something like a cancer insurance. It may be beneficial for you based off of your history and background and all of that. But if you are getting it with the intention of thinking it's going to cover all of your needs, understand that your basic medical insurance has things that it covers, and that cancer insurance may not kick in until everything is exhausted with your basic medical benefits. Okay. And you want to consider your lifestyle needs and who else is going to be covered, and if you've got any major, so there's a lot of different factors to consider. And so that's why you want to be careful about taking just, straight the opinion and biases of other people when you're making your decision.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. I believe